There comes a point in your life where you realize that begging for love, pleading for attention, and shrinking yourself just to be accepted is far too expensive for the calling on your life. You start to see that peace is priceless, dignity is priceless, and the God-given strength inside you is worth more than any relationship that requires you to sacrifice your worth to maintain it. Becoming mentally strong doesn't mean you stop loving people. It means you stop negotiating your value. You learn to stand in the truth of who you are. Even if it means standing alone for a season, you learn that you don't chase what is meant for you, and you don't audition for spaces you were created to own. Mental strength is choosing yourself without apologizing for it. Your worth is not determined by who chooses you. It is not stamped by the people who stay. And it is not erased by the people who leave. There are seasons in life where you will give your best, your heart will be pure, your intentions will be right, and still someone will treat you like you are optional. And if you aren't careful, you will start to believe that their inability to see you clearly is proof that you are not enough. But your value doesn't decrease because someone is emotionally blind. Your value doesn't disappear because someone is unavailable, distracted, insecure, or unhealed. Your value is rooted in who you are, not who approves of you. Mental strength begins when you stop measuring yourself by how people respond to you. Some people only recognize diamonds when they are polished and sparkling. Others can recognize treasure even when it's covered in dust. You cannot let the people who overlook you become the mirror you look into to define yourself. If someone fails to honor you, that's not a reflection of your lack. It's a reflection of their capacity. Some people simply don't have the emotional maturity, the spiritual awareness, or the personal wholeness to value you correctly, and that's not your assignment to fix. There is a version of you that once chased explanations, that once begged people to stay, that once tried to convince others that you were worth loving, worth choosing, worth respecting. You replayed conversations in your head, wondering what you said wrong, what you could have done better, how you could have been more or less to keep their attention. But becoming mentally strong means you stop auditioning for rooms you were not meant to be in. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that don't have the capacity for your soul. You stop saying, "What's wrong with me?" And you start saying, "Maybe this is not the place where my value will be honored." When you understand your worth, you begin to move differently. You no longer chase people. You match energy. If someone is inconsistent, you stop overextending. If someone is dismissive, you stop oversharing. You realize that begging for attention is a symptom of forgetting who you are. When you know your value, you don't fight to be seen. You don't compete to be chosen. You don't cling to people who are unsure about you. You let clarity choose you. You let alignment hold you. You allow yourself to be in spaces where your presence is not just tolerated but treasured. And this doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. It means you honor your heart enough not to hand it to people who haven't proven they can carry it. It means you stop compromising your peace in exchange for proximity. It means you refuse to let loneliness trick you into entertaining what you've already healed from. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away without explaining, without convincing, without defending your worth. Not because you're bitter, but because you finally understand that your soul is too valuable to be negotiated. There will always be someone who doesn't see you. There will always be someone who makes you feel like you're asking for too much when you're really just asking for the bare minimum. But there will also be people who recognize your heart, who value your presence, who honor your boundaries, who choose you without hesitation. And you will only meet those people when you stop settling for the ones who don't. So you learn to release the need to be chosen. You learn to release the desire to prove yourself. You learn to release the urge to chase love that keeps running from you. You start trusting that what is meant for you will find you without you having to sacrifice your dignity to receive it. And you begin to understand that your worth has been intact from the very beginning. Silence is more powerful than begging for attention. There comes a moment when you realize that constantly explaining yourself, over-talking your worth, and trying to prove your value to people who have already decided not to see you is draining your soul. You start to understand that not everyone deserves access to your voice. Not everyone earns the right to hear your explanations, your heart, your tears, or your side of the story. Silence is not weakness. Silence is discipline. Silence is choosing peace over chaos and dignity over desperation. When you're still growing emotionally, you think that attention equals validation. You think if someone responds quickly, engages constantly, or reassures you often, it means you matter. But then life teaches you that some attention is unhealthy, some attention is manipulative, some attention is breadcrumbing, control, ego, feeding, and emotional confusion disguised as care. And you begin to see that begging for that kind of attention is like drinking salt water. The more you consume it, the thirstier and emptier you become. You end up chasing moments of connection that never become consistency. You end up begging for presence from people who only show up when it's convenient, when they need something, or when they feel you slipping away. Silence becomes powerful because it refuses to participate in that cycle. Silence says, I will not entertain disrespect. I will not chase what avoids me. I will not fight to stay in places that are trying to release me. Silence is when you stop arguing with people about what you deserve. You stop trying to convince them that you are worth loving correctly. You stop repeatedly addressing the same behavior that clearly will not change. You stop calling out what they already know but refuse to acknowledge. Silence is not passive. Silence is a boundary. Silence is the language of self-worth. There are times when your silence will make people uncomfortable. They were used to you explaining yourself, apologizing for your feelings, or overcompensating for their lack. They were used to your emotional labor, your constant reassurance, your predictable reaction. But when you get quiet, you reclaim your power. You no longer feed the dynamic that drains you. You no longer validate behavior that hurts you. You no longer participate in conversations that go in circles and lead nowhere but back to your own frustration. Silence also allows you to see clearly. When you're always talking, pleading, persuading, and arguing, you blur the truth, you excuse red flags, you rationalize patterns, you tell yourself, maybe it's me, maybe I'm expecting too much. But when you become silent, you step back, you begin to observe instead of react. You notice who reaches out when you stop initiating. You notice who respects your boundaries instead of punishing you for them. You notice who values your peace instead of feeding off your chaos. Silence reveals what words were hiding. Silence exposes intentions. And silence isn't just about other people. It's also about you. It's about learning to be comfortable with yourself without needing noise to distract you. Some people chase attention because they are terrified of being alone with their own thoughts. But silence teaches you to sit with your heart, to process your patterns, to understand your triggers, to recognize where you're still healing. Silence is where God whispers direction, identity, and strength into the places that used to crave human validation. Silence is where you remember who you are. There will be moments when silence hurts because you want so badly to be seen, heard, and chosen. You want closure, you want understanding, you want change. But begging for attention rarely produces love. It produces control, it produces resentment. It produces unbalanced relationships where one person is always chasing and the other is always running. Silence breaks that imbalance. Silence says, if you want to be here, you will show up without being begged. If you value this connection, your actions will reveal it without me having to pull it out of you. Silence creates space for truth to step forward. And the beautiful thing is, when you begin to embrace silence, you stop reacting to every little thing. You stop responding to every provocation. You stop needing to correct every false narrative. You stop trying to make people understand who you are. You allow your character to speak louder than your defense. You allow your peace to speak louder than your pain. You allow your absence to speak louder than your arguments. Silence becomes your strength, not your punishment. So you step back, you go quiet. You choose not to chase. You choose not to beg. You choose not to perform for attention that should be freely given. You learn that the right people will not require you to exhaust yourself emotionally to be seen. The right spaces will not silence your worth while demanding your presence. And the more you honor your silence, the more you begin to hear the voice inside you saying, you were never hard to love, you were just loving in the wrong direction. Distance is protection, not punishment. Creating space between you and what hurts you is not cruelty, it's clarity. There are seasons where the most loving thing you can do for yourself is step back from environments, relationships, and routines that slowly drain the life out of you. Distance doesn't always mean you stop caring. It often means you finally started caring about yourself enough to stop tolerating what keeps breaking you. Some people will misunderstand that. They will call you cold, dramatic, or distant because they were comfortable with access to you while contributing very little to your well-being. But choosing distance is not about rejecting people. It's about protecting your peace. There are moments in life where you keep giving the benefit of the doubt. You keep offering grace. You keep saying, maybe they'll change, until you begin to notice that the only one changing is you. Your light is dimmer. Your laughter is quieter, your confidence is cracked. You become hyper-aware, walking on eggshells, adapting yourself just to prevent conflict. And then there comes a day when you wake up and realize that peace is not found in constantly fixing others while abandoning yourself. Peace is found in stepping back and allowing the truth to breathe. Distance gives the truth oxygen. Distance allows you to see what was blurred by emotion. Distance doesn't make you selfish, it makes you safe. You are allowed to set boundaries without guilt. You are allowed to say, I love you, but I need space. You are allowed to outgrow chaos. You are allowed to stop responding to disrespect. You are allowed to say less, answer less, share less, and still be a loving person. Protecting your emotional health is not a sin. It is stewardship. It is acknowledging that your time, your heart, your energy, and your mind are precious resources that should not be poured into people or places that consistently mishandle them. Sometimes distance is the only language some people understand. As long as you keep engaging, explaining, defending yourself, and rescuing situations that hurt you, the cycle continues. But distance interrupts the cycle. Distance says, I refuse to continue participating in my own exhaustion. And this isn't distance fueled by bitterness. This isn't distance rooted in revenge. This is distance guided by wisdom. You can wish someone well and still move on. You can forgive and still create space. You can care and still choose yourself. Distance also reveals intentions. When you step back, you see who actually values you and who only valued what you did for them. You notice who reaches out without needing something. You notice who takes responsibility instead of shifting blame. You notice who respects your boundaries instead of criticizing them. Distance exposes who was committed to the relationship and who was just committed to the convenience of your presence. It's not about testing people. It's about allowing reality to unfold without you constantly holding it together. There is a part of you that fears distance because you equate separation with loss. You worry that if you pull back, you'll be abandoned. You worry that if you stop overgiving, you'll be forgotten. But the truth is, anything real will survive space. Anything genuine will not need you to shrink, chase, or plead to keep it alive. And anything that falls apart because you stop betraying yourself was never stable to begin with. Distance doesn't destroy real connection. It only removes illusion. Distance also gives you back to you when you're wrapped up in dysfunction. You lose track of your own needs. You forget your voice. You disconnect from your intuition. You silence your discernment. But when you step back, you can finally hear yourself again. You notice what your body has been trying to tell you. You notice the tension you normalized. You notice the anxiety you kept excusing. Distance gives you the quiet needed to heal, to breathe, to rebuild your strength, to remember that you are worthy of environments that don't constantly cost you your sanity. And yes, sometimes distance hurts. It hurts to walk away from history. It hurts to release what you prayed would work. It hurts to accept that love doesn't equal compatibility and effort doesn't equal health. But the pain of distance is temporary. The pain of staying in what is slowly breaking you is permanent. Choosing distance is choosing long-term healing over short-term comfort. It is choosing to stop touching what cut you, even when you still care about it. So you step back, not because you're heartless, but because you're healing. You step back, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. You step back, not to punish anyone, but to protect the parts of you that God is still restoring. And little by little, you begin to realize that peace grows in the space where you once allowed chaos to live uninterrupted. Boundaries are an act of self-respect. They are not walls to keep people out. They are doors that teach people how to enter. When you begin to understand your worth, you realize that your heart, your time, your energy, your mental space, and your peace are sacred, and anything sacred must be protected with intention. For too long, you may have believed that love meant endless access. You may have thought compassion meant constantly saying yes, even when yes cost you your sanity. You may have trained yourself to be available for everyone but yourself. But sooner or later, your soul starts whispering that this is not sustainable. That constantly pouring from an empty cup is not holy, it is harmful. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about controlling what you allow into your world. They are the invisible lines that say, this is where I end and you begin. Without them, you become emotionally entangled in situations that drain you, confuse you, and distract you from your purpose. You begin to take responsibility for emotions that are not yours to carry. You begin to overextend, overexplain, overcommit, and overfunction while others underdeliver, underappreciate, and underestimate you. Boundaries break that pattern. They teach you to honor your capacity rather than constantly violating it in the name of being nice. There will be people who don't like your boundaries because they benefited from your lack of them. They were accustomed to you saying yes before you even processed the question. They were comfortable with you tolerating their inconsistency, dismissiveness, or disregard. So when you finally say, I won't accept this anymore, they may label you difficult, distant, selfish, or changed. But that doesn't mean the boundary is wrong. It means the dynamic was. And part of becoming mentally strong is learning to withstand the discomfort of other people's disappointment without abandoning yourself to remove it. Boundaries are an expression of self-awareness. They force you to ask honest questions. What do I need to feel safe? What drains me? What gives me life? What patterns keep showing up in my relationships? Where do I feel resentful, exhausted, or unseen? Resentment is often a sign that a boundary should exist but doesn't. When you do things out of obligation rather than alignment, you silently train yourself to live in internal conflict. Boundaries realign you with yourself. They teach you to show up authentically instead of performing to avoid rejection. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you stop loving people. It means you love them from a place of truth rather than fear. You are no longer driven by the fear of being abandoned, misunderstood, or disliked. You stop trying to be everywhere for everyone. You stop rescuing people from consequences that are meant to grow them. You stop over-explaining decisions that were never meant for community voting. You start trusting that the right relationships will adapt and strengthen in the presence of healthy limits. And the ones that crumble under the weight of your self-respect were never as stable as you thought. Boundaries also demand that you respect yourself in private, not just in public. It's one thing to tell others no. It's another to tell yourself no when you're tempted to settle, overreact, revisit what hurt you, or re-enter situations you already healed from. Self-boundaries sound like, I will not chase love. I will not tolerate disrespect. I will not ignore red flags. I will not abandon my values to keep someone close. These internal commitments rewrite your identity. They train your nervous system to expect peace instead of chaos. They remind you that your heart is not a charity project and your presence is not a discount store. And sometimes the hardest boundary is with your past self, the version of you that stayed too long, that tried too hard, that allowed too much. You don't shame that version. You simply refuse to return to it. Growth is not proven through words, it is proven through limits. Through the ability to walk away from what wounds you even when it still feels familiar. Through the willingness to disappoint others before you betray yourself again. There is beauty in the moment you realize that boundaries are not barriers to love. They are the structure that keeps love healthy. Without them, connection becomes control. Generosity becomes self-erasure. Compassion becomes codependency. But with them, love becomes mutual, respect becomes reciprocal, peace becomes a lifestyle instead of a temporary escape. You no longer need to scream your worth. Your boundaries speak it for you. So you begin to say no without guilt. You begin to rest without apologizing. You begin to protect your peace the way you once protected dysfunction. You begin to understand that you are not hard to love. You are simply choosing not to be loved carelessly anymore. And every boundary you set becomes a declaration that you finally see yourself as worthy of the same care, attention, patience, and protection you have always given away so freely. Healing teaches you how to stop overgiving. When your heart is unhealed, you confuse love with sacrifice. You believe that the more you give, the more you tolerate, and the more you endure, the more worthy you become. You pour out your energy, your time, your attention, and your compassion until you are emotionally dehydrated, hoping that your effort will finally convince someone to stay, to choose you, to respect you, or to love you, right? But healing slowly, gently, and sometimes painfully reveals that overgiving is not a badge of honor. It is often a symptom of loneliness, insecurity, fear, or unresolved wounds that whisper that you must constantly earn what should naturally be reciprocated. There are seasons where you give beyond your capacity because somewhere inside you don't feel like enough as you are. You give to avoid abandonment. You give to avoid rejection. You give to fill the silence. You give to distract yourself from the emptiness. You say yes when your heart is screaming no. You make yourself emotionally available to people who are emotionally unavailable to you. You carry conversations. You fix situations. You heal others while ignoring the fractures forming in your own soul. And for a while, it feels noble. It feels loving. It feels spiritual. But eventually, you notice the cost. You begin to feel invisible in the very relationships you pour the most into. Healing begins when you start asking yourself why you keep overgiving, why you're drawn to people who always seem to need rescuing, why you accept crumbs and call it a feast, why you feel guilty resting, why you think love equals self-abandonment. And as you heal, you realize that you have been trying to earn what should be freely given. You realize that constantly proving your value is emotional labor you were never meant to perform. You realize that love is not a negotiation where you trade your peace for proximity. As you heal, you become more aware of reciprocity, not perfection, not scorekeeping, but mutual effort, mutual respect, mutual emotional presence. Healing doesn't make you cold, it makes you conscious. You begin to notice when conversations are one-sided. You notice when you're always the planner, the listener, the comforter, the fixer. You notice when your needs are consistently minimized while theirs are magnified. And instead of pushing past that awareness, you honor it. You stop rationalizing the imbalance. You stop romanticizing potential. You stop ignoring your own emotional starvation just to keep the illusion of connection alive. Healing teaches you that you can be kind without being used. You can be loving without losing yourself. You can be supportive without being drained. You can care deeply without constantly crossing your own boundaries. You no longer jump every time someone calls. You no longer rush into safe situations you did not create. You no longer feel responsible for the happiness, stability, or emotional regulation of grown people who refuse to do their own work. You understand that carrying everyone else's burdens while neglecting your own is not compassion, it is avoidance, and it slowly destroys you. There will be people who become uncomfortable when you stop over-giving, not because you've changed for the worse, but because you've stopped allowing dynamics that only worked when you overextended. They may accuse you of being distant, selfish, or different, but the truth is, you are simply becoming balanced. You are no longer available for relationships that only function when you are depleted. You are no longer the emotional oxygen tank for people unwilling to breathe for themselves. And the relationships that were only sustained by your overgiving may fade, not because you failed, but because they were never mutual to begin with. Healing also teaches you how to receive. When you are used to overgiving, receiving can feel uncomfortable, foreign, even undeserved. But as you heal, you allow yourself to be supported. You allow others to show up. You allow love to flow toward you instead of only through you. You stop measuring your value by how much you can endure or how much you can offer. You begin to see that your presence is valuable even when you're not fixing, serving or pouring, and slowly your identity shifts. You no longer see yourself as the rescuer, the savior, the fixer, or the emotional caretaker. You see yourself as a whole person with needs, limits, and worth that exists even when you're not doing anything extraordinary. You learn to sit with yourself instead of always giving yourself away. You learn that healthy love does not require constant self-sacrifice. It invites rest. It honors boundaries. It reciprocates effort. It nourishes instead of draining. So you start to give from a different place, not from emptiness, not from fear, not from insecurity, but from overflow, from peace, from clarity, from a grounded awareness that you matter too. And giving from that place no longer costs you yourself. What God has for you will not require you to beg. Real alignment never demands that you shrink yourself, silence your voice, or exhaust your soul just to hold on to it. When something is meant for you, it carries a natural flow. That doesn't mean there won't be effort, growth, or challenge. But it does mean you won't have to chase after it like your worth depends on catching it. You won't have to constantly question your value or compete for a place that was already yours by design. What is meant for you will recognize you. It will make room for you. It will not confuse you, belittle you, or require the consistent sacrifice of your peace. There are chapters in life where you become so used to striving that you start to believe begging is normal. You beg for clarity. You beg for consistency. You beg for communication. You beg for the bare minimum while calling it loyalty. You tolerate mixed signals. You rationalize disrespect. You cling to relationships, opportunities, and environments that were never meant to carry your destiny just because you're afraid of the unknown. But healing teaches you that anything that truly belongs in your life will not have to be secured through desperation. It will not slip through your fingers the moment you stop overperforming. When something is meant for you, it allows you to rest. Not rest as in laziness, but rest as in assurance. You don't have to constantly prove your worth or fight to stay relevant. You don't have to compete for affection or beg to be seen. You don't have to wonder whether you're too much or not enough. You don't have to keep walking on emotional eggshells, terrified that one wrong move will cost you everything. Real alignment leads to stability. It leads to mutual respect. It leads to environments where you are valued simply because you exist, not because you never stop giving. And sometimes the evidence that something is not meant for you is the fact that you have to beg for it to stay. You have to beg someone to choose you. You have to beg to be treated with kindness. You have to beg for communication. You have to beg to matter. You find yourself negotiating your own standards just to avoid being abandoned. But the truth is, what is truly for you will never require you to betray yourself in order to keep it. It will never ask you to sacrifice your dignity as payment for proximity. Letting go of begging doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. It means you trust that you don't have to manipulate, control, or force what is right. It means you release the need to chase what does not pursue you with the same intention. There is a freedom that comes when you decide that you will no longer sit at tables where your presence feels like a burden. You stop fighting to stay in rooms where the door keeps closing on your heart. You stop pleading for entry when you were created to be invited in. When you begin to trust that what is meant for you will come with peace, your standards shift. You become less impressed by potential and more grounded in patterns. You stop being moved by empty promises and start paying attention to consistent action. You stop believing that love should always feel like struggle. You start embracing the idea that real connection will not require you to constantly doubt yourself. You begin to understand that alignment doesn't mean perfect circumstances. It means relational safety, emotional honesty, mutual effort, space to grow without fear of losing everything. There will be seasons of waiting, uncertainty, and stretching, but waiting is different from begging. Waiting is rooted in faith. Begging is rooted in fear. Waiting says, what is meant for me will find me. Begging says, if I don't chase it, I will lose it forever. One comes from security, the other from scarcity. And when you heal, you slowly transition from scarcity to security. From clinging to releasing, from chasing to attracting, from forcing to trusting. You also begin to realize that sometimes rejection is protection. Sometimes closed doors are divine redirection. Sometimes distance, silence, and endings are not punishment, but preparation for what will truly honor your heart. You stop taking loss personally and start seeing it as guidance. You stop asking, why didn't they choose me? And start saying, thank God I don't have to beg to be chosen anymore. You start believing that if something leaves your life, it was either seasonal, educational, or misaligned. And the more you lean into that truth, the lighter you become. You no longer chase validation. You no longer lose yourself trying to secure what doesn't fit. You no longer compromise your worth for temporary companionship. You begin to walk with a quiet confidence, knowing that whatever is meant for you will be safe, mutual, honoring, steady. Whatever is meant for you will fit your healed self, not just your wounded one. So you choose trust over desperation. You choose dignity over clinging. You choose alignment over attachment. And in doing so, you create space for what was truly meant to find you, meet you, and stay without you having to beg for it. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow. Many times, the disrespect you continue to receive is the disrespect you have silently agreed to tolerate, not verbally, not intentionally, but through your patterns. Through the times you swallowed your feelings instead of speaking them. Through the times you laughed off what actually hurt you. Through the times you kept showing up for people who barely showed up for you. Through the times you accepted inconsistency, lack of effort, emotional absence, and thought, at least they're still here. But your silence becomes instruction. Your tolerance becomes training. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to teach people that your boundaries are flexible, your standards are negotiable, and your presence will always be available regardless of how you are treated. Teaching people how to treat you is not about control. It is about alignment. It is about honoring your soul enough to create environments where respect is the foundation, not the luxury. You do this first by becoming honest with yourself about what hurts you, what drains you, what feels heavy, what leaves you questioning your worth. Many people don't know how to ask for what they deserve, so instead they settle for what they are given. They tell themselves, it's not that bad, while their spirit quietly whispers, you deserve better than this. Healing requires the courage to stop gaslighting yourself, to stop minimizing your needs, to stop pretending that constant disappointment is normal. Every time you accept behavior that dishonors you, you reinforce a pattern. When you keep replying after being ignored, you teach inconsistency that it still has access. When you keep forgiving without accountability, you teach carelessness that it comes without consequence. When you keep overgiving to people who undergive, you teach imbalance that it will always be sustained. But the moment you begin to shift, the moment you start requiring respect as the foundation instead of the bonus, everything changes. Not because people suddenly become perfect, but because you stop auditioning for places that require you to betray yourself to stay. And yes, some people will leave when you raise your standards. Some relationships will fade when you stop accepting the bare minimum, not because you're unworthy, but because the dynamic depended on your self-neglect to survive. When you finally say no more, the version of you they benefited from no longer exists. This can be painful. It can be lonely. It can feel like loss. But in reality, you are being released from what could only thrive in the presence of your insecurity. Growth always exposes misalignment, and anything that cannot coexist with your healing was never meant to carry your future. Teaching people how to treat you also means modeling how you treat yourself. You cannot ask for respect while constantly disrespecting your own needs. You cannot demand consideration while continually abandoning yourself. Self-respect looks like resting when you are tired instead of pushing past your limits to please others. It looks like honoring your emotions instead of burying them to avoid conflict. It looks like allowing yourself to take up space without apologizing for existing. The more you respect yourself, the more uncomfortable you become with environments that refuse to mirror that respect back to you. It also requires consistency. Boundaries lose power when they are constantly bent. Standards lose clarity when they depend on mood, loneliness, or fear. Teaching people how to treat you means standing firm even when your feelings tempt you to break your own rules. It means choosing long-term peace over temporary comfort. It means remembering that every time you accept less than you deserve, you are writing a silent script for how the relationship will continue. And every time you stand in your worth, you are rewriting that script, even if it costs you some characters along the way. There will always be people who try to test your boundaries. People who want the benefits of your presence without the responsibility of honoring your heart. But you are not obligated to prove your loyalty by tolerating mistreatment. You are not required to water relationships that refuse to grow. You are not called to convince anyone of your value. You are simply called to embody it. And when you do, the wrong people will become uncomfortable, but the right people will feel at home. As you heal, you realize that love without respect is not love. Attention without consistency is not loyalty. Words without action are not commitment. You stop being moved by empty gestures and start being anchored in truth. You start to see that you are not hard to love. You were just in environments that made you beg for what should have been the standard. And little by little, you begin to align with relationships and spaces where you are valued, honored, heard, and seen without having to constantly fight for a place at the table. So you speak up when something hurts. You step back when you are not valued. You stop justifying what clearly is not healthy. You stop betraying yourself for the sake of belonging, and you remind yourself daily that you deserve a love that does not ask you to disappear in order to keep it. Your worth is not proven by who stays. It is revealed by who you refuse to beg to stay. There is a deep shift that happens inside you when you finally realize that love, attention, and respect that must be chased will never feel safe once it is caught. You can spend years trying to convince someone to see you, trying to earn effort, trying to inspire consistency, trying to hold together connections that only survive because you never stop fighting for them. But healing teaches you that begging for love is the fastest way to forget your own. It strips you of your voice, your boundaries, your joy, and slowly your identity until all that remains is the version of you that is terrified of being alone.